The fight with the swift blade was a bloody battle. Whenever Enkrid tried to strike once, he had to endure being cut twice. Even so, Enkrid remained unchanged. He was the same as always. Even when his life was hanging by a thread, he was the same. It was because his momentum and temperament didn't change easily that he was able to be here now.
Hey, your eyes are really annoying.
A smile spread across the Swiftblade's face. Seeing that, Rem mumbled several times, even though he flinched as they fought. Isn't this the moment when he can't stand it anymore? Naturally, his mouth opened.
Right, it's annoying, it can be.
Why did he understand the Swiftblade's feelings at this moment? It was something he had experienced himself, Scuff. Sure enough, Ragnar, Jackson, and Auden were all busy nodding their heads. No matter what, he remained the same, unchanged. He just silently did his job. He was a man who acted before considering right and wrong. Auden, for the first time, used the isolation technique on another's body. Because of him, Jackson taught him what was called the sense of evasion, and Rem gave him the heart of the beast. Ragnar also had a similar reason for passing on his skills to Enkrid. Those eyes, that stubbornness, never thinking of giving up. Watching him could drive a person crazy.
Aren't you scared?
The Swiftblade asked, seemingly exhausted. As he spoke, he subtly twisted his blade. He changed into an irregular stance and moved his feet. Enkrid also changed the position of his sword, moving his body by sliding his feet along the ground without using his knees. Sliding his feet without bending his knees made it look like his body was moving smoothly.
Of what?
You almost died just now. That goes for you too.
In a recent exchange, the Swiftblade pretended to extend his left foot forward but pulled it back to deceive him. Enkrid fell for it and swung his sword forward, but the thrust came in at the perfect timing in reverse. When he saw the tip of the sword split into four and curve towards him, anyone would feel dizzy. Enkrid felt the same. But that didn't mean he was about to be skewered by the blade. How did he avoid it?
The sense of evasion.
Jackson's skill saved his life. Instead, his nape was slashed. It felt like his neck was wrapped in a burning hot lump of metal. A searing pain followed. This wasn't the only wound. Enkrid had a hole in his stomach and his forearm tendon was nearly cut. Just a moment ago, his neck was almost severed.
That's it for today. Hey, today's not the only day.
Receiving a signal from Kreis, he shouted loudly. The Swiftblade had no intention of stopping. He was going to continue slashing. Of course, he couldn't carry out his intention.
Be careful. You're annoying.
Rem suddenly spoke. Somehow, he was at Enkrid's left rear. What would happen if he cut down Enkrid here? He hadn't yet revealed his secret move, but even if he did,
I would die too.
the Swiftblade naturally valued his own life over others.
Got it.
He retracted his sword and showed his palms. It was a signal to stop. Even then, there was a faint murderous intent left. Rem sneered and looked away from him. It didn't matter if he looked away. At this distance, no matter what he did, he was confident his axe would reach first. Moreover, Rem wasn't alone. A sneaky feral cat was on the opposite side. How many noticed that? At least Swiftblade didn't.
Come on, today's really not the only day. Rest a bit. Get to know each other better, and if you're bored, there are plenty of places in the alley behind the inn to entertain you. Don't know which places are good? Ah, that's unfortunate. But I thought that might be the case.
Kreis used the break to secure his own profit, but it didn't feel particularly annoying. He had a strange charm that diffused the tense atmosphere.
Now this is what we call the border guard, the good map.
It was a simple map that needed no lengthy explanation. It marked shops selling seasoned jerky, marmalade, well-baked bread, and other points of interest, making it easy to understand.
10 coins per map.
The amount was ambiguous. 10 coins wasn't much for some, but certainly wasn't little for those with big hands.
Give me one. I need to eat well after losing blood.
As the Swiftblade accepted a map with a grin, a few onlookers from the caravan also bought some. The rapier swordsman and the Count's party naturally each took one, and finally, a mixed-blood giant cautiously asked,
"Isn't this on the gentleman who shed blood today?"
Kreis, who was about to hand over the map, pulled back his hand with a swift motion.
That was until yesterday. From today, you all have to pay full price, lady.
The mixed-blood warrior, hearing the word lady for the first time, nodded. Then she handed over exactly 10 coins and received the map. Kreis clapped his hands and addressed everyone.
It won't be a loss. Rest well, explore the city a bit, and if you're bored, you can spar with each other, but no accidents. Especially, please be mindful of the city folks' safety.
Kreis bowed like an actor on stage, then lifted his head and said,
Welcome to the border guard.
Although he was bleeding profusely, It wasn't to the point of death, so Enkrid observed everything and thought, does that bastard think the border guard is some sort of tourist city? Despite its guise as a trading city, this place was ultimately a military city. There wasn't really anything here for them to enjoy or see. Not that they seemed likely to leave either. Why wouldn't they?
How about next time?
The look in the rapier swordsman's eyes as he said that, they sparkled. There was a glint of competitive spirit, curiosity as well. No matter his intentions, he wasn't likely to leave. The mixed-blood giant was the same. She seemed more than willing to stay. Needless to say, Eden Molson and his group too.
Let's go again.
As soon as he recovered, he shouted that, but watching the bout with the Swiftblade, he kept his mouth shut. Still, the twitching of his eyebrows showed he was clearly not pleased with the situation. In any case, since he was staying, those who came as his escort would also stay.
Ah, how satisfying.
Was this what it felt like to have your heart's desires fulfilled? He felt full even without eating.
You're planning to make a killing, huh? What about the city folks' safety?
Isn't that something they should handle themselves? Enkrid, expressing his doubt to Kreis, who had returned, heard a whispered reply, as if to prove he hadn't spoken thoughtlessly.
That Swiftblade guy, I don't have a good feeling about him. If left alone, he seems like he'll cause trouble, so I need to report to the higher-ups to keep a closer watch. It's one thing if he dies fighting a soldier, but if an outsider comes to the city and causes trouble like killing a commoner, it'll be a real headache.
Enkrid thought back to the Swiftblade he fought today. That sword, that swordsmanship, he was memorable. He didn't have time to gauge his personality while fending off his attacks. He was too busy dealing with him. But Kreis had a keen eye for people, so he was likely right.
Jackson, report to the higher-ups.
Will do.
After sending off the sneaky alley cat, Enkrid limped back to his lodging once again.
Hey, is your body gonna hold up?
Rem, who was sticking close by, spoke. It was nagging, but Enkrid couldn't argue back. He was right. His body was in tatters. He had a hole in his stomach and his arm's tendons were almost severed. If he died, everything would be healed. Only what he had trained would remain. In a way, it could be considered a convenient and advantageous ability. But Enkrid endured. If someone asked him why, he wouldn't have an answer. He just wanted to. He struggled, fought, and moved forward. In his struggles and fights, he had removed the word give up from his vocabulary. Enkrid didn't know. But that was the nature of the ferryman's curse. It was meant to make one complacent for a day. If the ferryman knew Enkrid's mindset, he might have thrown his lamp into the Black River out of anger. Of course, Enkrid didn't know any of this. He just silently did what he always did.
Well, you didn't die. You speak too easily. Let's see. Did you really see that guy's swordsmanship earlier?
I saw it.
For a brief moment, he recalled the earlier fight. The swift blade mixed correct sword technique and fluid sword technique. Such a blend was called a technical sword in the continent. More precisely, it was an Eastern-style technical sword. The trajectory of his sword was bizarre, and its target points were peculiar. It seemed to aim for the arm but suddenly struck the shoulder, aimed for the shoulder but suddenly hit the thigh. Reading its trajectory was difficult, so how did he react? At first he countered. He aimed to land a strike for every strike he received. He swung his sword quickly and powerfully. How did the opponent respond? Swiftblade blocked his sword and countered, aiming for his wrist. From a technical standpoint, his nickname Swiftblade was well earned, and he hadn't even used the swordsmanship that earned him that nickname, so he was outmatched. He lost. Defeat. Was it regrettable? Not at all.
I can catch up.
If one day of training wasn't enough, he would take 2. If 2 days weren't enough, he would take a week. If a week wasn't enough, he would take a month. With time, he believed he could reach his goal. He wasn't outmatched in tactics, strength, or speed. It was purely a difference in skill proficiency. Technical swordsmanship was inherently like that. It was a swordsmanship that true fit the term bizarre.
If you saw it, it's easy. Just see everything and counter it.
Rem's teachings suddenly made sense.
Is there a need to win purely by skill?
Even if the destination is the same, the paths to it aren't limited to one.
Use your head a bit.
Rather than running on a single path, he decided to see the wider picture. Even if his body could keep up, he decided not to settle.
That's the spirit.
Rem smiled. His smile was pleasant to see. Come to think of it, Swiftblade's smile had been rather displeasing. Maybe Kreis had judged him correctly. Returning, bleeding profusely, Esther saw him and coughed, almost like a sarcastic laugh. It was a look of disbelief. You went out fine this morning, and now you're back like this?
How is it that her nagging feels worse than Rem's?
It was a curious thing. Seeing this, Rem chuckled and said,
Hey, Panther Wizard, this guy will probably keep doing this.
The Black Panther didn't respond to Rem's words. Ragna silently asked if today had been fun. Enkrid nodded. This wound wouldn't heal in just a day, but to Dunbaichel watching nearby, this was still surprising.
In 3 days.
I'm fine now.
Did this beast woman plan to be surprised every time he got up? Enkrid thought this as he started walking. He had heard they were still staying at the Market Inn. Who should he face? His heart pounded, pushing him forward. His arm wasn't fully healed yet, but he had his other hand, and the ointment Jackson had given him was effective. Odin had secretly sprinkled some divine power on him. Though it didn't manifest as a visible light of divine power, it had boosted his healing, allowing him to get back on his feet quickly. Without that, even with his regenerative abilities, Enkrid would have been bedridden for over a week. The Swift Blade felt a murderous urge. Should he leave the inn at night and slit a few throats? The wounds he received from fighting Enkrid had scabbed over after 2 days. Seeing his own wounds stoked his desire. Unable to contain himself, he started to leave.
Stop it, small human.
A mixed-blood giant blocked his path.
Huh?
I said stop.
What?
Feigning ignorance with a smiling face, a man sitting at a table in the pub on the first floor, raising his glass, also glanced over. It was the rapier swordsman.
Swiftblade from the Black Blade Bandits, right? You guys stick together well. Stop it, for the sake of everyone staying in the city.
What are you talking about?
The Swiftblade laughed and tried to deny it, but the two men said nothing. It wasn't as if he could ignore them and leave.
I just wanted to take a night stroll.
Muttering, he climbed back up the creaking wooden stairs. After the Swiftblade went up, the rapier swordsman sipped his drink, and the mixed-blood giant stood there, deep in thought. It was impossible to know what was going through each of their minds.
Why didn't you fight that giant?
The rapier swordsman suddenly asked.
Neither the target nor the purpose.
He was curious about the skill of a friend named Audin. The rapier swordsman nodded. Soon, one of Eden Molson's guards descended the stairs. Hearing the creaking sound of the stairs, both naturally looked up. Without a word, the guard walked outside the inn. But it seemed the Swiftblade, who was still watching, followed and asked,
Why did you let that guy leave? He's not going to cause any trouble.
What about me?
You will cause trouble.
The Swiftblade pondered the rapier swordsman's instant reply. Should I cut him? Then he quickly backed down. Though not seriously injured, he was still wounded. Moreover, those two had already seen his swordsmanship. It was only fair that he also saw theirs, so next time he would pit Enkrid against one of those two. It turned out just as he hoped. When Enkrid returned, the rapier swordsman stepped forward.
It's my turn this time. Let's do it.
Enkrid was indifferent, as it didn't matter to him who stepped forward. Seeing this, the Swiftblade felt a twinge of annoyance.
Those damn eyes.
Why were they so unwavering anyway? Enkrid faced the rapier swordsman. This time there was no severe injury. It was a clean match, fairly balanced, honestly, to put it bluntly.
Why did that guy come here?
The Swiftblade roughly understood the purpose of the others who came with him. He even knew the true identity of the large female warrior. He just pretended not to know. But the rapier swordsman was different. Through the match, he was teaching Enkrid.
How did it come to this?
The rapier master was used to teaching. When teaching was a familiar task, observing was beyond familiarity. It was a skill. While Frog's talent detection was a unique ability of his race, the rapier master's eyes were of a distinctly different nature. It was a combination of personal talent and accumulated experience. From what he saw with those eyes, there was definite improvement. It was hard to believe he lacked will. Occasionally his eyes would shine as he executed a flurry of continuous sword strikes, cutting off his own retreat.
Correct sword technique.
He mixed in the middle sword technique. He was heading towards something truly complete. The opponent exceeded his expectations. Originally, there was not even a sliver of hope. His talent and skills were of that level. Undoubtedly, this was the first time his judgment had been so wrong. That stirred something in the rapier master's heart. It touched his heart and moved his mind.
Guidance. Sparring.
That was his intention from the beginning. He had walked the path of a knight but turned back when his talent fell short. But he had never been defeated by someone without will. Even now, that remained true.
Improvement.
It was indeed surprising, and his skills were outstanding. However, the black-haired man before him still couldn't face a genuine junior knight. That was his judgment. Swords clashed repeatedly, sparking as they met. Through the relentless strikes, blue eyes elongated.
Footwork, too.
It was impressive. He had surpassed human limits, that was certain. If his opponents were lazy individuals relying on mediocre talent, the man before him would win. Then how had he been beaten by Swiftblade? Having seen that fight and faced him now, he knew.
If the goal was a fight rather than killing, if sparring came first.
Swiftblade was the opposite. He fought to kill, and yet it was just by a hair. In his view, it was only a matter of who took the first step. Swiftblade had not even realized it. His skill improvement was truly remarkable. It was surprising enough to warrant repeated amazement. That was why the words telling him to give up lingered, prompting him to draw his sword. Starting slowly and evenly, he wouldn't need to exert his full strength in wielding the sword. Even so, fast and strong with mixed-in techniques, it was the fluid sword technique, blending speed with smoothness, striking while flowing, flowing while striking. It was to show that such swordsmanship existed in the world, along with engaging in mind games.
Even if it's advised to master a single form like correct sword technique, that's flawed teaching.
While specializing in one form is possible, it's proper to learn all 5 sword techniques. At the very least, a superficial knowledge of them is necessary. Why is that necessary? To block, to evade, to do anything you must know. That's why. In that regard, the rapier master emphasized the diversity of swordsmanship. He showed that mind games didn't always occur in the form of correct sword technique. For instance,
Flow.
as he tried to flow with the sword, Enkrid's eyes gleamed. It was a bait. Enkrid delivered a vertical slash that seemed capable of cutting through anything. It was a lightning-like strike. The rapier master, facing it, seemed to block but twisted his body aside. Fluid sword technique, flowing without contact. The lightning-like sword cut through empty space. The sound of air being sliced was clear. Was it advanced swordsmanship or skilled swordsmanship? After raising the sword tip to thrust, Enkrid's posture naturally faltered. The ensuing advantage belonged to the rapier master. He pressed on. Slowly, bit by bit, it was like the art of killing a frog. The method of killing a frog with boiling water starts with cold water and gradually heats up. The essence of this swordsmanship was pressure. It was a message conveyed through the sword.
You cannot surpass this. This is your limit.
After relentless pressure and relentless attacks, he was trapped and forced to stop. Enkrid encountered a wall he couldn't surpass with the heart of great strength, the sense of evasion, or all the sword techniques he had learned. Did he despair because of this? There was no time for that, and even if there was, he wasn't the type to think that way. Enkrid simply continued to swing his sword heavily, but the rapier master, watching this, wasn't entirely pleased. The sparring session had continued in a completely different manner than expected. In conclusion, he didn't see any flashes of brilliance from his opponent.
Was he not the genius I had overlooked?
If not, his growth rate didn't make sense. So why was there no spark? Why was his talent so dull? He expected the frog to jump out of the pot. At the very least, he hoped to see it stretch its leg, but it was just slowly drying up.
Let's stop here.
It was good instruction.
Enkrid expressed his gratitude. It was a sparring session worth it. This person didn't aim for his neck, nor was he after his fame. He just appeared out of nowhere to give guidance.
I'll go next today.
A half-blood giant with a sword and shield stepped forward. The current sparring hadn't taken a toll on him. He just needed to catch his breath. Enkrid nodded. Their fight was similar to the previous one. The intensity and violence were dizzying to watch. If the fight with Swiftblade was a battle where he could get holes or be cut at any moment, the fight with the half-blood giant seemed like something could be crushed or smashed at any moment. Enkrid endured it. He suffered injuries similar to the first day. This time, the half-blood giant performed a trick by gripping the sword's tip and swinging it like a blunt weapon. She also shook her shield up and down to deceive the eyes. Enkrid countered by mixing the middle sword technique and the correct sword technique to pressure his opponent. It seemed he was applying what he had just learned from the rapier master. Of course, the rapier master watching wasn't satisfied.
He hasn't improved.
A genius would show improvement after just one sparring session, but this friend Enkrid at best was just ordinary. That annoyed him. The master's eyes naturally narrowed.
All right, that's it for today. If you're bored, you can take on some monster subjugation requests around here. The rewards are substantial, and it'll clear your frustrations.
That sounds good.
Swiftblade responded with delight to Kreis's words. He was itching to do something. Most of all, the two opponents he saw today didn't seem easy. One was his polar opposite, and the other seemed to be hiding his true skill.
Troublesome bastards.
Even so, running away now was not an option. If he fled under these circumstances, the Black Blade bandits might send their assassination squad after him. Hadn't he recklessly used the krona of the bandit group all this time? Now was the time to risk his life. Moreover, his murderous impulses were making his blood boil. If he ran away now, it would be difficult to wield his sword as he pleased for a while.
I want to kill.
He longed for the sensation of piercing through tender flesh, but he couldn't just kill a vagrant in the city and get beaten to death, so he couldn't kill just anyone. If he did something, the people around him would foam at the mouth and attack him. All of them had sharp eyes and outstanding skills.
What a mess I've gotten into.
He hadn't thought it would be easy, but it had become a tangled mess.
I might as well cut down some monsters.
It was a reasonable decision. Kreis nodded and spoke to the soldier who had joined him.
Yes, this way.
The soldier led Swiftblade, marking the end of today's sparring session. Enkrid had to be half-carried. His thigh muscles were trembling, making it difficult for him to walk.
This will heal after a little rest.
Enkrid said.
Yeah, right.
It might heal, but if it repeats, you could end up with chronic injuries. Brother, having faith is good, but don't be overconfident.
Odin recited words from the Holy Scripture. Believing in one's body was good, but doing it in moderation was better.
I suppose.
Enkrid nodded. Of course, it was something even a dog wouldn't believe.
When we get back to the quarters, let's have a quick hand-to-hand sparring session.
Ragnar said.
Sharpening the senses makes it easier to anticipate a move ahead.
Jackson added from the side. Everyone seemed to have a lot to say. More precisely, they didn't seem to like seeing Enkrid getting beaten up. Was it different from when they were the ones beating him up? Enkrid didn't care. What did it matter? There was so much to do right now. He had learned and practiced, but it still wasn't coming together all at once. It couldn't be helped. Then, he just had to take it one step at a time again. At least some semblance of talent remained in his body now, so he wasn't stuck like before. This in itself was a significant improvement. Enkrid returned to the quarters with his idle thoughts and continued his hand-to-hand sparring with Ragnar.
Even with an injured body, you...
Finn shook her head as she watched. These days, Finn seemed quite busy too. After whispering with the ferry company commander, she frequently went out at dawn.
Where have you been sneaking off to lately?
Rem asked out of boredom. Finn gave a vague answer, not even looking up as she organized her belongings.
Morning dew is good for the skin.
I think she's mocking me.
Rem muttered. Enkrid inwardly agreed but decided to side with Finn.
That's a victim mentality. You have a habit of taking others' words the wrong way.
It wasn't revenge. It definitely wasn't because Rem kept saying his brain was broken. As Rem furrowed his brows, Ragnar pushed Dunbachel forward.
Go, do your job.
What was that job?
Huh?
Dunbachel approached Rem reluctantly.
Oh, right. Time to train. Haven't done much of that lately, have we?
She had managed to reduce her daily beatings from twice a day to once, but it had only been 2 days. So what did she mean by lately? When Dunbachel glared at him, Rem looked pleased.
Yes, that fierceness. Good. Today, let's have a spirited, training session.
Dunbachel wanted to cry, but her pride held back her tears. So the two of them went outside. Enkrid continued his sparring sessions. After spending some time training, once his body was fully healed, he would grab someone staying at the inn for a sparring match again. Swiftblade excelled in sharp, unpredictable, and unconventional attacks. There was much to learn from him as well. The half-blood giant swung her sword and shield heavily. It was a combination of the middle sword technique and shield techniques. Though mixed with the correct sword technique, the deeper he delved, the more varied the middle sword and shield techniques became. Moreover, The initial shield charge he experienced was still threatening. Even a small opening allowed the half-blood giant to press on with her monstrous strength. In terms of stamina, Enkrid was not lacking either, but the opponent's sheer size made her a formidable weapon. The rapier master was still the same. He repeated the same actions every time. Aiden Molson also attacked relentlessly, but he wasn't a match. After being harshly knocked out in their third sparring session, he no longer dared to challenge easily. Instead, his guard stepped forward.
Your name?
No need to know.
He was a gruff and stern man. Enkrid didn't care. He didn't care why the guard stepped up only now. He was just glad to have another worthy opponent, so he smiled.
Definitely not normal.
The guard said. Enkrid ignored him. The guard's swordsmanship was based on the fluid sword technique. He flowed, targeted openings, and stabbed with precision. Enkrid was familiar with this technique. He had seen it before. It was no illusion. He had reviewed and reflected on it countless times, ensuring he wouldn't forget it. It was the technique used by someone from the Aspen faction. Specifically, it was used by the person he had cut down with his left hand, Mitch Hurrier. The Hurrier family symbolized Aspen's military prowess. So, was the guard a spy? Enkrid didn't care. He only cared if the opponent was a good match. So they clashed. They fought and collided. Their skills were evenly matched, and he couldn't easily win. Enkrid wasn't focused on winning.
If he had wanted to kill, he could have done so 100 times over.
Rem gave a sarcastic remark, because he didn't think Enkrid was just a man with straightforward swordsmanship.
What's left after killing?
This wasn't a battlefield. These were people who came to test their skills. When it was time to speak through swordsmanship, that's what he wanted to do.
Is he smiling again? Do you enjoy this?
Swiftblade often laughed. His smile deepened and his tone became harsher. He himself often laughed and commented on Enkrid's smile. In that situation, Swiftblade and Enkrid faced each other repeatedly. At some point, Swiftblade's mind was filled only with thoughts of Enkrid. He was entirely focused on killing his opponent, with no other impulses interfering. Only one person remained. All his murderous intent was directed at Enkrid. This was a first for Swiftblade as well. The half-blood giant had a similar experience, but instead of murderous intent, she felt something else.
Why does he keep challenging me?
She was certain of her superiority. If Enkrid really wanted to kill, yes, he could probably take down Swiftblade, but the rest? That was impossible. In reality, even Swiftblade likely had a hidden trump card, so if they fought to the death, the odds were 50-50. That was her judgment. So, was there anything to gain from this sparring? But why was he so happy about it?
All right, today it's you.
Why was he so happy despite being beaten so badly? He lifted his sword with a subtle smile, and the emotion on his face was crystal clear. Even someone as emotionally inept as her could see it clearly. He looked like a child experiencing a moment of sheer joy, a child filled with innocent delight as if it was their birthday party. She had heard that this man wasn't that young, so why did he have that look on his face?
Let's begin.
How could he speak so brightly? She didn't understand. One thing was certain, though, everything about this man made her blood boil. It was the fighting spirit, the competitive urge. The giant's blood mixed within her was boiling. In this moment, she wasn't a cultist, but a warrior. For the first time, she wanted to be a warrior rather than a cultist. It was a moment where the indoctrination and something ingrained in her since childhood began to crack. A moment where she recognized and understood desire beyond the teachings and commands of the cult. It was a moment where what she had subtly felt throughout her life started to overflow. The inner feelings she had never shown on the surface, feelings no one knew about, not even the bishops, tangled within her heart.
You're really strange. You know that?
The half-blood giant spoke. Her words were awkward, but the meaning was clear.
I told you from the start. This part's broken.
The gray-haired subordinate behind Enkrid spun his finger around his temple. Initially, she ignored this gesture, but now she understood it.
Yes, you're broken.
The half-blood giant said, and so was she. Enkrid, unconcerned, extended his sword.
Let's fight.
He just craved battle. He showed his desire. He enjoyed the moment. A smile similar to one slowly appeared on the half-blood giant's face. Enjoying the fight itself was a first for her. It was filled with novelty, finding fulfillment in seemingly meaningless sword swings. She couldn't help but smile as well. Thus countless sparring matches ensued. Each opponent faced over a dozen times. At some moments, Enkrid was severely injured. At others, he escaped with minor injuries. After many sparring sessions, the rapier master shook his head.
It's still not right. There's a limit. But maybe I was wrong, so I have to test it. Can he overcome this? That's all I'm curious about.
Muttering nonsensically to himself, the rapier master faced Enkrid. At that moment, blades surged from the rapier master's body. Enkrid had experienced this before from Asia, a member of the Red Cape Knights. The intangible blades imbued with will-battered Enkrid's entire body. It was overwhelming. Squire Asia. She was a member of the Knight Order that came with the frog Luagurni. The technique she used was called intimidation. It was an art based on willpower, and what the swordsman before him now displayed seemed similar. No, it was even superior. Enkrid saw intangible blades that slashed, pierced, and cut through his body. There were more of them, and they were faster than Asia's had been. Even knowing it was false, he couldn't ignore it. Instinctively, he knew it stemmed from the opponent's willpower, triggering his sense of evasion. He almost reflexively stepped back, but Enkrid gritted his teeth. His body flinched, his shoulders trembled. To avoid the approaching blades, he had to steel himself internally. It was the same as before. If he couldn't break through, it would be retreat and evasion. It was the same as Asia's intimidation. If he couldn't overcome it, he would be crushed against the wall, admitting defeat without even fighting, without reaching out once. The ferryman's laughter came to mind. It would surely mockingly ripple the river. Enkrid suppressed his instincts.
You might die.
The rapier swordsman spoke as Enkrid stood his ground. Enkrid didn't listen. Even in the days when death was the end, he risked his life, not struggling to die, but scrambling to move forward. So should he retreat now? Should he?
Step back.
The rapier swordsman repeated, and Enkrid began swinging his sword at the approaching blades. Transforming the sense of evasion into an attack form, he unleashed the heart of great strength, opening the gate of sixth sense. Focus point activated, immersing him entirely in the moment. He could see all the approaching blades, the intangible swords, slowly and surely. Enkrid swung his sword. He struck and neutralized them one by one, deflecting and breaking them. The shattered blades vanished like phantoms, breaking like glass, and for each blade he broke, a new one appeared.
Foolish,
the rapier swordsman said. That was the last thing Enkrid heard. He missed one blade. It curved in, speeding up like a swift hawk. It was easy to miss. Enkrid felt the blade cut his neck. It felt real. It was horrifying with a sensation of heat. It felt like certain death. Enkrid closed his eyes, but he didn't meet the ferryman. When he opened his eyes again,
You're awake, crazy commander?
He heard Rem's voice. Enkrid, overwhelmed by intimidation, swung his sword wildly at the air like a madman, then soon showed only the whites of his eyes and collapsed. Even as he collapsed, his sword form was precise and clean, showing proper training. Afterward, he fell silently, like a puppet with its strings cut. Right after Enkrid fell, someone kicked the ground. No, several people moved. Auden ran like the wind to catch Enkrid. Rem drew his axe. Ragna stood beside him, blocking the space between Enkrid and the rapier swordsman. Jackson was already behind the rapier swordsman.
If I wanted to kill him, he would already be dead,
the swordsman said. Rem understood. The opponent before him was someone even he couldn't guarantee victory against.
Well, if I were serious about killing, I could do it alone too.
But was he alone here? There was no need to reveal his hidden tricks.
If he's dead, cut him,
Ragna said. There was no doubt in his words. If he said he would cut, he would cut. That belief made Ragna's sword strong. Rem, devoid of his usual smile, spoke expressionlessly.
Let's be careful, okay? My axe tends to act on its own. It's got a mind of its own, an ego axe.
The joke was said without emotion, making it more chilling.
His body is fine. As for his head, we'll have to see when he wakes up.
Auden, after checking Enkrid's breathing, spoke. The usual term brother was absent. Intimidation affects the mind. It is a force that pressures and constrains. When he awakens, he could become a simpleton. Of course, Auden wasn't worried about that. Enkrid wasn't someone who would crumble easily. He wasn't the kind of person who would fall apart over something like this. However, if the blade of fear had taken root in his heart, that's what the opponent did. Not physical chains, but leaving a wound in the mind. It's something that could be called psychological trauma. Once fear is engraved, it doesn't easily fade.
Let's see after he wakes up and we check his condition.
The word brother was still missing from Audin's speech. That was how the fight ended. When Enkrid woke up, he listened to the story of what happened right after he fainted and nodded.
I see.
Intimidation, a technique based on will. So the opponent was at least a squire, moreover someone who knew how to use a sword properly.
Interesting.
Enkrid murmured. Interesting? Everyone's attention focused on him. It meant his head was broken. They all knew that. But then again, it seemed possible with Enkrid. Isn't he a total madman? That thought flashed through everyone's mind. A short silence passed, wondering if he was really okay, or if he was bluffing, or if he could still act like this after seeing a real sword.
Since he's broken as always, he seems fine.
Rem concluded. So this was Enkrid's normal. Scared of seeing a sword, it was possible. They had often seen people whose minds broke after rolling through battlefields. There were stories of a soldier who, after seeing a giant on the battlefield, would faint at just hearing the word giant for the rest of his life. However, this wasn't applicable to Enkrid. He had already experienced real pain and survived death. Someone who didn't back down from real death wouldn't suffer over being cut and stabbed by imaginary blades.
Even when he drew the sword back then, it seemed like his head was broken.
Christ said, twirling his right index finger next to his ear, as if recalling a similar experience from when Enkrid drew the cursed sword. Rem smacked Kreis on the back of his head. It was such a sharp hit that his eyes, befitting his nickname Big Eyes, seemed to pop out.
Ouch! Why did you hit me?
That's my thing.
What is your thing? Enkrid silently shook his head and stood up.
Only I can do that.
Rem grumbled mischievously. Kreis pouted but retreated quietly. He wasn't someone you could reason with anyway.
Are you really okay, Commander Brother?
I must have slept too much. I feel light.
To the question of whether he was okay, Enkrid replied that he felt light. Audin smiled gently.
Truly an incredible mental strength, brother.
Odin found himself looking at Enkrid anew. How could he not? In the long time spent honing his divinity, the qualities required of everyone were patience and a stable mindset.
Only those who do not succumb to any hardship or threat may lift their heads.
Audin muttered a part of the scripture. No one listened closely. Ragnar wasn't particularly suspicious by nature, but he thought confirmation was necessary. With a swish, he drew his sword and stopped it just a finger's width away from Enkrid's nose.
Are you asking for a duel?
Enkrid said, looking blankly into Ragnar's eyes. A person who fears the sword cannot hide their unease, but how were Enkrid's eyes now? They were the same as ever, straight and true, the same eyes that had unnerved even the swift blade.
We can do it another time.
Ragnar sheathed his sword. As always, Jackson found Enkrid fascinating.
Feels like he wouldn't die even if you killed him.
Not that he would just stand by and watch if Enkrid was in real danger. Anyway, Enkrid stood up unscathed. After that, the dueling continued. The rapier swordsman, instead of using the same gentle and friendly techniques before, showed intimidation again. Once more, Enkrid fought off the intangible blades, but eventually fainted. Technically, it wasn't death, it was just fainting. Something resembling death pierced and stirred his mind and soul, but that couldn't change Enkrid.
He's holding on.
The rapier swordsman said. The swift blade grumbled at this.
Why don't you either kill him outright or stop this half-hearted torture?
The rapier swordsman ignored him. The mixed-blood giant in Eden Molson's guard voiced a different opinion.
Next time, let's do it at the end. It's anticlimactic to have him faint before we even get started.
The guard said. The mixed-blood giant nodded. They didn't want their own opportunities taken away. This was also curious. The rapier swordsman saw Enkrid's limits, but acknowledged what needed to be acknowledged.
Is it motivation?
None of those present were the same as they had been initially. They all changed the more they faced Enkrid. Summer had passed, and it was now dry autumn. The border guard in northern Penhanil had a short autumn. Soon the cold would come. Autumn was already halfway through, and it had been 30 days since they arrived at the border guard.
Tell him next time will be the last.
The rapier swordsman said.
Do as you wish.
Rem replied. Enkrid, who had fainted from intimidation and then awakened, nodded.
I want to overcome that.
There's only one way.
There were always pieces of advice when they dueled those who came to the city. This time was no different. Ragnar spoke up.
If you can't fend them all off, You need to deflect the intangible blades with your mind.
It wasn't a vague statement.
Will.
At the very least, it meant that without something intangible to overcome intimidation, he couldn't win.
Will is something you realize, but if it were such a force, forming a knight order would be impossible. A squire is someone who forcibly awakens their will. It's possible. However, just because you awaken it doesn't mean you can immediately counter such intimidation.
The last part was like saying you can't run immediately after learning to walk. In any case, based on Ragna's words, the opponent was testing him. Whatever the intent, whether good or evil, whether it was goodwill or malice, Enkrid didn't care. He simply wanted to overcome it, just as he always wanted to overcome whatever strangled him, but he had no intention of dying and repeating today, over and over. Another day passed, and it was a night like any other. Belle, who was on duty at the castle gate, saw someone approaching in the middle of the night.
"Who was keep a merchant?"
Belle asked, already knowing the man wasn't just some merchant. Logically, it was strange for someone to be traveling alone, and intuitively, the man seemed formidable.
"Is this where the former soldier is?"
the man asked. He wasn't wearing a black cloak or any suspicious attire. As he approached the light of the torch, Belle saw he was young. His skin was somewhat dark, and he had a sword at his waist. He carried a single arming sword and 3 daggers on the other side of his belt, and it all looked very natural. Despite being armed, he didn't seem threatening.
"I was hoping to see him."
The man spoke again. Belle tilted his head, then straightened it before responding.
"We can't let outsiders into the city at this hour. If you want to come, do it tomorrow during the day. And you can meet him tomorrow, right?"
His last question was directed at his colleague.
"Yes, that's right,"
his colleague replied. Coincidentally, tomorrow was the day Enkrid was expected to recover and come out. He had been dueling continuously recently. Though he had some rest days, he would come out tomorrow. He wasn't seriously injured.
"You're in luck. You can meet him tomorrow."
The man bit his lip and said,
"I can only make time tonight. Can't I see him now?"
Belle thought the man was being stubborn, but there was something strange about him.
I should test him.
Many sought the former soldier, but few could overwhelm Belle. Many turned back after defeating him.
"Just a common soldier."
Saying such things, Belle patted his colleague on the shoulder.
"But I will keep moving on this. If anything happens, sound the emergency bell."
"Don't worry. I'll put an arrow in his forehead before the bell rings,"
his colleague, always carrying a bow, said while tapping his side. He was an archer, part of Vengeance platoon. Belle opened the side gate and stepped out. Several sentries watched them. Standing in the torchlight, Belle spoke.
"If you can knock me down, I'll pass your message. Want to try?"
"Sure."
Though Belle pointed his spear at him, the man faced him empty-handed.
"But I will keep moving forward."
Belle's voice grew gruff.
"If I cut you with this, you'll die, and I don't think there's a need to kill you."
This overflowing with confidence, Belle felt a surge of irritation, which he channeled into his thrust. The fight was brief. The man grabbed Belle's spear mid-thrust. Belle saw his movements but was half a beat too slow. The man closed the distance and struck Belle's stomach with his palm. The impact felt like it pierced his belly. Belle thought he had a hole in his gut. Barely holding back the urge to vomit, he heard the man's voice.
"You can take a hit."
"There's a drill instructor who gets furious if you fall from a single hit,"
Belle replied, exhaling. His legs wobbled from the heavy impact. Still, Auden's punches were twice as heavy. Belle made up his mind. The man was more skilled than him, and he said he couldn't wait until morning.
I'll just pass the message.
He thought he'd just inform Enkrid. The decision was his. Enkrid had mentioned several times that there could be people like this. He said he wanted to meet everyone, even if they were just passing through. If their skill was proven, it wouldn't matter if it was late at night. There had been many such encounters.
"I'll be back."
Belle retreated obediently. The man neither showed hostility nor behaved rudely. Belle entered the barracks and relayed the message to Enkrid.
Wait a moment, I'll go see.
He stepped out immediately.
"But I will keep moving alone."
Why?
"No, well, I guess that's fine."
Belle had acted as the gatekeeper for those seeking Enkrid up until now. In his opinion, the current visitor wasn't as formidable as those in the market. He didn't feel overwhelmed or intimidated. After Bell conveyed this, Enkrid set off lightly, going alone.
Let's go.
Enkrid approached, and the two exchanged words under the torchlight before clashing swords. Their fight ensued. It was intense and lively. It gave the illusion that dawn was breaking between them. The sight seemed to be infused with light. In the midst of this, Bell noticed something strange. The opponent's sword suddenly grazed Enkrid's forehead, and the opponent shook his head as if in dismay. Following this, Enkrid's body trembled, and he collapsed forward, falling face first. He couldn't support himself, which caused the fall. Bell blinked.
Dead.
Then the world distorted, tore, and changed. Enkrid's death was like a pendulum resetting the day. With the curse activated, Bell lost memory of the day that had passed. Repeating the same events, Bell went to find Enkrid again.
Commander, someone is here to see you.
All right.
Bell tilted his head in puzzlement. With no details, Enkrid immediately set off. Enkrid, stepping out, showed a wide smile. It was a rare sight, his face brimming with excitement.
Do you know him?
Bell asked.
No.
Enkrid replied while walking. Though he said he didn't know, his answer was filled with immense joy and excitement. It was evident that Enkrid couldn't hide his emotions.
One more hit and you might actually die. Want to keep going?
It wasn't quite time to sleep yet, but as the sun had set, and it was getting dark, Rem scratched his toes and asked, such a lackadaisical attitude. Enkrid was cleaning his sword and checking his equipment before washing up. Next to him, Kreis was polishing his dagger with flaxseed oil. It wasn't a particularly gentle touch, but it was a skillful one, a jack-of-all-trades with big eyes. Enkrid replied nonchalantly,
I won't die.
To be precise, even if he did die, he'd come back to life. He almost died fighting a mixed-blood giant. He narrowly escaped death against the Swiftblade. Even sparring with Edin Molson's guards was no joke. It was a match with real swords. Naturally, if things went wrong, it wasn't uncommon to get stabbed somewhere. From an ordinary person's perspective, it might have seemed like he was desperately trying to die. It was a sparring match where letting one's guard down could lead to death. Normally, you might think to intervene, but their commander was a genuine madman who enjoyed this sort of thing. But is it really right to confront that intimidation? If you don't have the strength to peel it off and overcome it immediately, it's like falling off a cliff with your bare body or jumping onto a rock-sharpened blade.
It's no different from charging a heavily armored cavalry with just a quill pen.
Ragnar chimed in, speaking while his hair was still wet from a wash, now in casual clothes. It meant it was as pointless as that. Would Audin and Jackson's opinions be any different? Both said similar things while taking care of their own business.
It's fine.
Only Enkrid thought differently. Because he saw a path? Because he had a way to counter it? That wasn't it. It was just that whatever appeared before him, he knew retreating meant he could never advance again. The heart of the beast, focus point, blade of sensation, and the isolation technique may have given him talent. But they didn't make Enkrid an unprecedented genius. So did anything change? No. There was much to learn, to master, and to gain. So why avoid it? Ragnar felt a kind of stimulus seeing Enkrid not giving up.
Will.
Though he didn't perfectly master it, he could at least handle it. Only he couldn't use the technique of intimidation. Even if he could use it, controlling it freely was another matter entirely. In other words, it meant there was no way to practice or train it in advance. A thrilling sensation stabbed at his heart, and it was a desire he had never felt before. Something akin to thirst, which others might call ambition if they knew.
Higher.
Ragnar quietly immersed himself. It was a time for rest and relaxation for everyone. It was also the evening when Esther turned human. Now once or twice a month, though only briefly, she had to stay in human form. Esther's eyes were on Enkrid. No, she had been looking at him for a while. It was only now that Enkrid noticed her gaze. Her enchanting eyes were like a blue lake or a bright blue moon. With those eyes fixed on Enkrid, Esther spoke.
Foolish.
Enkrid was familiar with that word. In some ways, he acted shrewd and perceptive. But when it came to his sword and his dreams, he was more than just stubborn. He was foolish. Enkrid knew this well, so it wasn't an insult to him.
Can you turn human once a month?
In response to Enkrid's question, Esther dismissed it as none of his business. In truth, she could turn human as many times as she wanted in a month, but for now it was more comfortable to stay as a panther. However, there were many things Esther had to do in her human form. She hadn't forgotten but had postponed the maintenance of her enchanted world and the adjustment of the flash golem bonehead she acquired earlier. If the enchanted world isn't frequently checked, its power fades like a dull blade.
Foolish indeed, it's broken.
Rem said with a laugh, tapping his head with the hand that was scratching his toes. Enkrid ignored him neatly. It was that kind of evening. Auden was meditating, Ragnar was already in bed like a vacation, and then Bell came by.
But I will keep moving forward. Someone's come looking to spar.
For Bell to come himself at night meant the challenger's skill was quite exceptional.
Those who come at night are always up to no good.
From behind, Kreis spoke while rummaging through his stuff. He seemed to be looking for something after finishing his dagger maintenance.
I'll go take a look.
Whether it was shady or not, a breakthrough was needed immediately. For Enkrid, sparring with a new opponent was that breakthrough. The rapier swordsman did not acknowledge it, but Enkrid felt that he had improved by facing the mixed-blood giant, the Swift Blade, Count Molson's guards, and the rapier swordsman. To others it might seem minor and insignificant, but he had indeed improved. In the process of honing and reflecting on his sword skills, they had been helpful. This time, too, he believed it would be helpful and set off. Bell asked if he was going alone, and Enkrid nodded nonchalantly. Nothing was likely to happen immediately. The others, including Rem, didn't show much interest, and rightly so. There had been quite a few who had requested sparring matches in the middle of the night. Some came secretly, fearing their reputation would be damaged if they lost in front of spectators. Others claimed they couldn't show their skills publicly. Both were valid reasons. Enkrid generally respected his opponents. After all, being sought out was enjoyable in itself, but that didn't mean he accepted just anyone. It was only natural to meet opponents whose skills were somewhat proven. Bell served as that benchmark. In other words, if Bell called, it meant the opponent was worth facing.
But I will keep moving forward. What kind of technique did he use? Even though he had a sword, he used only his fists and hands, hitting like this with his palm. Smack, and it hurt.
Bell mimicked the opponent's technique. It was awkward and hard to gauge. By the time they reached the gate, they saw a man whose hair, appearing red in the torchlight, would likely be closer to brown in daylight. His face was youthful, and his arms were long. Enkrid assessed his opponent's skill through the perspective learned from the isolation technique.
Long arms and a good center of gravity.
A well-balanced body and long arms were advantageous for handling a sword.
I am the former soldier.
Enkrid stepped forward and spoke. A gust of wind from behind bent the torch flames to one side. As a result, the shadows between them tangled and then separated.
Oh, it's you.
The opponent's eyes widened. While not exactly bright or clear, they held no particular malice or murderous intent. He appeared to be someone who had killed but had clear standards, conviction or something similar. Of course, it was just a guess. One couldn't judge a person by appearances alone. There was a playful look on his face. If Rem's playful expression had a demonic slyness, this one felt more like innocent childlike mischief.
Sorry about this, for coming at such a late hour.
The opponent apologized first, bowing his head halfway. He also scrutinized Enkrid with his eyes. It was a good posture.
It's fine.
The man's eyes scanned Enkrid's entire body, from chest to feet and back up, speaking without hiding his gaze.
A well-trained body.
Was it an exaggeration to say that the emotion in his voice could be felt? Probably not.
Where are you from?
Enkrid asked, not hiding his anticipation.
Shepherds of the wilderness.
It wasn't a long conversation. Honestly, it was trivial. Enkrid had grown accustomed to the embarrassing nickname of the former soldier. This meant there had been many challengers seeking him out, but he hadn't expected someone like this. The Shepherds of the Wilderness, as the name implies, were a group with unbelievable combat prowess, herding sheep in the wilderness. If you trace back their history and traditions, some say they date back to before the beginning of the Empire, a nomadic tribe. Not that it changed anything. If anything, his anticipation grew even more. The wilderness is a land overrun with monsters and beasts. Herding sheep there? They were certainly no ordinary people.
Let's do it.
At Enkrid's words, the person moved. His speed was astonishing. Just before the opponent's sword was drawn, Enkrid's sword sliced through the darkness first. Clang, whoosh! Drawing and slashing in one motion. A middle sword technique, upward slash. Through the blade cutting the wind, he saw the opponent's eyes. He also saw that the opponent had somehow already drawn a dagger, and Enkrid felt as though a line had been drawn between him and the opponent. A sharp, low sound filled the air. The speed of the dagger was incredibly fast. The moment he realized it, it was already right in front of him. Enkrid shifted his weight onto his left foot and twisted his body, leaning back, a reflexive response. The sense of evasion activated. The dagger then angled sharply, a jagged trajectory. In that moment, Enkrid switched his grip on his sword from both hands to a single grip. He used his free left hand to retrieve a black-bladed dagger from his waist, blocking the opponent's dagger, a weapon he had acquired after defeating the Black Blade bandits. The daggers collided, sparks flying. In that brief moment, Enkrid pulled back the sword in his right hand. Instead of a swing, it was more of a drawing cut. The opponent didn't retreat but rather maintained the proper distance, a distance where a short weapon like a dagger could be effective. The drawing blade was blocked by the opponent's dagger held at an angle. Scrape! Sparks flew at close range, but neither of them flinched. Neither could catch their breath properly. They had entered an intense moment, as if they were the only two in the world, where not killing the other meant death. They broke through the moonlight, scattering dirt, fighting isolated from everything around them. The opponent's hands moved faster. Enkrid's hands and feet also moved busily in response. The shepherds of the wilderness were skilled in martial arts. Enkrid didn't back down either. Neither could gain the upper hand, and Enkrid momentarily forgot many things: the place, the weather, the situation, even his opponent. His heart pounded, craving short breaths. Amidst such exchanges, Enkrid was immersed, engulfed, drawn in. A sensation similar to when he faced Mitch Hurrier took over him. At one moment he grabbed the opponent's outstretched elbow and unleashed the heart of great strength. Enkrid wasn't calculating or understanding his own movements. It was purely instinctive, within the realm of senses. He grabbed the elbow, pushed it to his right side, then moved his foot to get behind the opponent. Simultaneously, he raised his sword horizontally to the opponent's neck. With the opponent's back to him, he pressed the opponent's neck between his blade and his body. It was a guillotine cut technique, where the elbow was locked, twisted behind the opponent, and then the neck was slashed. Enkrid pulled the blade. Without hesitation, he was on the verge of victory, about to sever the neck. He felt resistance in the pulling blade. Enkrid knew his sword was no ordinary weapon, yet it was blocked. The opponent's sword, still in its scabbard, was somehow wedged between the shepherd's neck and Enkrid's blade, a weapon that, in hindsight, looked like an ordinary black stick. The shepherd let out a sigh. Simultaneously, he rocked his body back and forth and then pushed Enkrid's chest with his back. Despite unleashing the heart of great strength, Enkrid was pushed back. The opponent's strength was formidable. The shepherd turned around. Now his eyes held a murderous intent. Enkrid couldn't afford to be pushed back, so he too filled himself with killing intent. From below to above, he stepped his left foot outward and performed another middle sword upward slash, strength, weight, rotation, and timing. Everything aligned, and Enkrid felt a thrill. At the same time, his upward slashing sword met the opponent's black staff. A sound similar to an explosion erupted. Along with it, the sheath shattered as if bursting, and the blade inside sprang out. Enkrid reacted, but he couldn't prevent the blade from grazing his forehead. Immediately after being cut, the opponent mumbled and abruptly retreated. In other words, his immersion was broken.
I wasn't supposed to use this.
His mumbling reached Enkrid's ears a beat later.
Damn it, sorry,
he said.
Well.
Enkrid found it hard to finish his sentence. What is this? Something was seeping into his body from his forehead. Poison? No, it was something different, something other than that.
Is there a priest nearby? If you go quickly, you might survive, though it might already be too late.
The shepherd seemed flustered, his words disjointed. A horrific pain started from his forehead and spread through his entire body. At the same time, a scream echoed from somewhere.
You see, you shouldn't recklessly cut people with this. This sword cuts a person's soul. If you can withstand it the moment you're cut, you might survive, but it seems it's too late.
It was an unnecessarily long explanation. Enkrid couldn't even comprehend it as he felt something constricting his heart. The shepherd was right. He couldn't understand everything, but he caught the last part about it being too late. Something he had learned all along couldn't overcome the thing that was now consuming his mind. His vision gradually darkened. He had thought he had experienced countless things, but this kind of death was a first. Something was tearing through and slicing his head. It was also something physical. Indeed, there was a black smudge pulsating on Enkrid's forehead, but he didn't feel resentful. Immersion and focus. It had been a truly meaningful time. It was hard to distinguish the skills between the opponent and himself. The shepherd had fought well. The advantage of the weapon? If this was a fight to the death, it was only right to use it. Of course, it had been a sparring match, and they had become so engrossed in the fight that it ended up like this. It wasn't an intentional cut, but a reflexive response. Enkrid liked that. He had done the same. Enkrid couldn't bring himself to resent the opponent. During the final guillotine cut, he had also intended to sever the opponent's neck. Stopping his hand there would have meant defeat for him. What can I say? There are moments when you'd rather die than lose. He felt something similar from his opponent right now.
Why?
He wasn't obsessed with victory, but if he could learn on a day like today, he wouldn't put much weight on defeat. If it wasn't for that, he would have fought the Swiftblade or anyone else to the death. Enkrid was used to reflection and contemplation. Thus, it was easy to understand his complex emotions. A brief realization came to him. The opponent before him resembled that kid he had met when he first wandered the continent, the one who, after only 6 months of holding a sword, managed to wound him in the stomach. Of course, that kid hadn't grown up and come back, but this opponent brought that moment to mind, the location, the time, the weather. All of it, even the purity on the opponent's face. That's why he didn't want to lose. Because he was reminded of the kid who had shattered his beginnings. He had even considered that kid his goal for a while.
Anyway, sorry for killing you.
The shepherd's attitude was similar. He bowed his head roughly. Damn it. It was an attitude of being sorry but having no other choice. The shepherd turned his body. As he did, he added a word.
If you come back to life, consider it a debt I owe. I'm Pell of the Shepherds.
He then took off, as if knowing it would be problematic to stay any longer. Enkrid fell forward. As he collapsed, his mind was filled with thoughts of what it could be if it wasn't poison. Then darkness, dying from just a graze on the forehead, death. Just before dying, he heard a woman's bizarre scream and the wailing of what seemed like souls rising from the depths of hell. It was a strange thing. When he closed and opened his eyes, the familiar black river appeared. The ferryman held a purple lamp and smiled.
Do you think you can overcome it?
The ferryman asked. Enkrid answered calmly.
It doesn't matter if I can't.
If being cut by the sword meant death, then he just needed to avoid being cut, or even if he was cut.
One more time.
He wanted to experience that immersion, that moment again. He wanted to fight that shepherd again. Regardless of winning or losing, the act of fighting itself filled his body with exhilaration. Enkrid was sincere about it.
Should I fix my broken head first?
With those words, Enkrid lost consciousness again. Anyway, could the ferryman hear outside sounds? Rem's shouted broken head had reached even here. In any case, Rem was the problem. It was a new day again.
One more time and you might really die.
It was the same evening again.
I don't care. Rem just teach Dunbachel properly.
Why do you seem harsher than usual?
Rem expressed his doubt, but Enkrid didn't answer.
Do you think knowing will help you overcome it?
The ferryman's question lingered in his mind. Enkrid also remembered his own response.
It doesn't matter if I don't know.
That was the truth. There was not a single lie in it. Above all, he enjoyed facing the shepherd immensely. How to put it? A half-blood giant, the Swiftblade, the Count Molson's guard, the rapier swordsman, and others who stayed by his side, Rem and Ragna, Jackson and Auden. Facing them all had not stimulated him as much. Their skills were roughly similar, and their attitude and age all played a part. Above all, he felt a sense of advancement. Enkrid's actual skill didn't dramatically improve with just one spar or one brush with death. Even if his dull senses became sharper, even if he now had a body that moved as he intended with a courageous heart, Even if he possessed superhuman concentration to see and dodge incoming arrows, the feeling and sensation of advancing couldn't be ignored. It approached him with exhilaration.
The stars are out.
Enkrid stepped outside before Bell arrived. Stars twinkled in the sky, and 2 moons were up. It was a dual moon night. It had to be said that it was a night unusually bright. The autumn night air was refreshingly cool compared to summer. A cool breeze brushed past his ears. This would soon turn into cold. In this brief autumn, Enkrid liked the temperature. Rem, curious about what he was up to, peeked his head out of the lodging.
There are still mosquitoes. What are you doing?
Buzz, before the words were fully out, a mosquito buzzed past his ear. Enkrid's left hand swiftly rose and caught the mosquito, killing it. Clenching his fist, Enkrid turned and said,
Going for a walk.
Suddenly?
Just felt like it.
You're quite sentimental. What, losing so often getting to you?
Enkrid took a step and asked,
If there was someone you had to defeat without even touching, what would you do?
I'd crush their head before they could move.
Rem answered straightforwardly. Enkrid was known for asking random questions often. After answering, Rem scratched his ear and continued.
Do you know? The commander's questions are always so random.
Are they?
Enkrid agreed. Why wouldn't he? There are times he walks alone. There are days he experiences alone. There are moments he enjoys alone. Enkrid's questions come from experiencing those moments in time alone.
They are random.
Enkrid replied vaguely and moved on.
Make sure to visit a temple sometime. From what I see, your head seems to be quite crazily broken.
That bastard. That mouth of his is always a problem. Thanks to Rem, even the ferryman had said something weird. In any case. Enkrid thought walls also appeared quite randomly before him. Is this the ferryman's trick? Or is this what life inherently is? Unexpected moments, unpredictable deaths. If this was another wall like before, he couldn't overcome it just by learning through one death. Nevertheless,
this will be fun.
Enkrid felt an unbearable joy. He walked and soon met Bell coming from the opposite direction. Naturally, he was walking the path Bell was coming from. In other words, the path to the castle gate.
But I will keep moving going,
Bell asked.
Where are you going?
I was on my way to call the commander.
They exchanged words, similar to a day they had experienced before. Enkrid recalled the things he knew. From the moment the priest and Bell were together, the screams that rattled his head, the monstrous cries that seemed to come from the abyss of hell. It was less a sound and more something that grabbed at his ankles from below. Of course, that wasn't the important part. The thing that had burrowed into his body wasn't a spell or a poison. To put it bluntly, it was someone's scream filled with malice.
For now.
He forgot what he had recalled. First came the fight. It was about the sparring. His opponent's skill was excellent, even without considering their swordsmanship. Let's see, should he start like Rem? Enkrid couldn't hide his joy. A smile constantly played on his face. Seeing this, Bell tilted his head. No matter how you looked at it, this person didn't seem normal.
But I will keep moving forward, if you're feeling unwell.
Bell spoke with concern.
No.
Enkrid was firm. His eyes were wide open and he straightened his back.
Huh?
I said no.
Enkrid's words were like a firm request, and his steps were incredibly light. If anyone knew his situation, every company member would shake their heads in disbelief. Could you call those steps heading toward death? They were more like a child going on a picnic. Enkrid showed light and cheerful steps as he headed out of the castle gate. The similar conversation ended again.
Then,
Enkrid took his stance and his opponent drew a dagger. Exhilaration, excitement, and anticipation pounded in Enkrid's heart. His entire skin tingled, and Enkrid followed Rem's advice. He immediately maximized the heart of great strength and swung his sword. The middle sword technique, lion slash. A downward strike that extended outwards. It was a dynamic slash, incredibly fast and powerful enough to cut down a moving target. His opponent reacted. Perhaps they judged that it was a strike too strong to block with a mere dagger. The opponent partially drew their sword from the scabbard, grasped the handle with one hand and the scabbard with the other, and blocked the attack. The lion slash was blocked. As Enkrid applied force to hold his position, the opponent did the same. Squelch. The two swords met and greeted each other. Steel against steel began to play a symphony. With their blades crossed, Enkrid and the shepherd locked eyes. For a moment, they assessed each other's capabilities through their gaze. Enkrid thought anew that this person's skill might be greater than he had seen in their previous encounters.
If this person who usually wields a sword is using a dagger,
then maybe that was the case. Of course, it didn't matter. Whether the opponent drew their sword or not, that was their choice. Enkrid had decided to stick with his own choice. From a distance, Bell swallowed hard as he watched. That marked the beginning of the clash, similar to the ones they had before. Enkrid pressed his opponent hard. He ignored the minor injuries inflicted by the dagger. As long as he avoided critical points, he aimed to cut him down within the range of his sword. Trusting his body's senses and innate reflexes, he moved to end the fight with a single strike. In the end, the shepherd drew his sword again. This time, the swordplay was different from when he had cut his forehead. Ping, pang, clang! The shepherd deflected Enkrid's light one-handed thrusts with the dagger, then used the opposite hand to throw the sheathed sword upwards. After drawing the sword, he threw the scabbard. Equally immersed, Enkrid reacted to all the opponent's movements. Using strength to retrieve his sword, he turned it into a heavy downward strike, and he blocked the flying scabbard with his forehead. Despite the scabbard hitting his forehead with a pop and bouncing off, Enkrid didn't close his eyes. As long as he didn't lose sight of the opponent's sword, he could evade. He had the sense of evasion. It wasn't impossible. The shepherd grabbed the sword he had thrown into the air, and its blade curved like a snake, cutting Enkrid's cheek. He dodged but missed by just half a finger's breadth. A fierce battle continued, both fully immersed.
I saw it.
The opponent's skill was formidable. Enkrid judged it to be higher than the swift blade. Avoiding such an opponent's blade without a single scratch was exceedingly difficult. But difficulty didn't mean he would give up. He only recalled what he learned from today's clash. A scream echoed in his ears again.
This shouldn't happen. I cut you without realizing.
He heard the opponent mutter. A monstrous cry, as if from the depths of hell, grabbed his ankle. His body was getting heavy. From just one experience, Enkrid knew what was happening, and knowing the pain could kill him, but it couldn't stop him.
What is that sword? Do you have any idea? Because I think I'm about to die. Just tell me.
Speaking even when you're cut, you're an interesting person. This is a sword with a demon's soul. I swore not to use it carelessly on people, so I'm sorry.
His words were disjointed. As always, the guy lacked sense.
All right, I get it. Pell, did I ever tell you my name?
He hadn't. He heard it in the first instance of today. That was the end. He died.
You're insane.
The ferryman appeared for the second time in a row. Seeing him, Enkrid spoke his mind without realizing it. It wasn't intentional. This was a dream, which made it impossible to hide his true feelings.
Are you bored lately?
The ferryman's body swayed on the boat. The purple lamp also swayed. Silence followed, brief but very quiet. The black river made no sound of flowing water at the end of the silence.
Bastard.
The ferryman tried to utter some curse, but Enkrid woke up immediately. Enkrid, upon waking, immediately questioned Ragna.
Is there a sword technique that can block all attacks?
Where did you hear that? It's the ultimate technique of the fluid sword technique.
The fluid sword technique was a flowing, streaming sword style. A sword that achieves both offense and defense simultaneously.
Can you do it?
The basics.
If he couldn't evade with the sense of evasion due to speed and timing,
then I'll just have to block.
That was the plan. After learning the basics of the fluid sword technique from Ragna, he set out again in the evening still.
Today will be more fun.
Thanks to 2 experiences, he figured out some of his opponent's habits. Today, he would use that knowledge. So began the 3rd day.
Do you know me? No, then why do you look at me like that? Do you have a habit of pretending to be familiar with people?
The shepherd tilted his head. Enkrid ignored him. They clashed again. It wasn't until after he fell for it that he realized what he thought was a habit was a trap. Barely overcoming and clashing swords again. This time, the blade grazed his thigh. Since he wasn't wearing armor, the blade cut through his pants and left a wound. Again, screams, monstrous cries from the abyss. As he tried to speak, a similar question returned.
Do you have it?
Why did he keep asking if he had something?
What?
The shepherd answered as if it were obvious.
We'll know.
Enkrid didn't say much more before he died again. How to put it, this death felt particularly frustrating. His neck wasn't cut, nor was his heart crushed. If he had to determine the cause of death, what would it be?
Heart attack.
The experience of feeling his heart stop was rare even for Enkrid, who had died many times. In any case, something had burrowed into his body from the wound and then scrambled and shook his mind. That was all. To put it metaphorically,
It feels like a bug entered my body.
the bug was incredibly swift and relentless, tearing his body apart. It strangled and shattered his heart. The fourth day, the fifth day, Enkrid refined his fluid sword technique during the repetition of 28 days.
Take care.
He began to familiarize himself with his opponent's swordsmanship.
Just so you know, I won't know even if I die.
With just a few swings, Enkrid forced the shepherd to draw his sword. Enkrid tried both dodging and blocking. He repeated this process. The unexpected wall continued to bring Enkrid death. After 47 times, Enkrid muttered as soon as he opened his eyes.
If I can't dodge or block.
It was a rare early morning when Rem was already awake. He spoke up.
Go on, tell me. What kind of dream did you have this time? I used to do some dream interpretation in my youth. So what kind of dream was it?
A dream where I die if I get even a scratch.
Enkrid was straightforward.
You need to give more details. Your attitude is all wrong.
Enkrid got up and moved through his usual routine, practicing the isolation technique, training, refining the fluid sword technique.
Did you already know some of this? Or did you learn it somewhere?
Ragnar commented as he watched Enkrid's swordplay. It was a remark on how much his skill had improved overnight. Enkrid didn't notice it himself. His mind was cluttered.
Is killing one skilled opponent the wall? Is that all it takes?
He pondered what the wall truly was. Reflecting on it, the ferryman's walls were never ordinary enemies.
The piercing freak.
From the start.
The magical trap.
From the sudden trap.
I could only use one hand.
None of the walls were simple. When he was heading toward the enemy's banner, he had even faced sorcery. So, what was it this time? Around the 70th day, Enkrid inflicted a major wound on his opponent. The shepherd coughed up blood from the slash beneath his chest. It seemed more like internal damage from the impact than a mere cut.
Damn, you didn't dodge and just rushed in?
Enkrid swung his blade, using it like a blunt weapon, despite being cut by his opponent's sword. The shepherd spoke informally for the first time, surprise evident in his eyes.
I saw an opening. Even though I told you, you'd die if my sword pierced you?
Yes, he said those words before the fight began. If you get cut, you die. Even a scratch will kill you. He said he didn't want to reach such a situation and just wanted to test his skills through sparring. But why should it be that way? Enkrid truly, genuinely didn't want that. A fight pushed to the limit, an opponent that made him pour out everything for the first time since Mitch Hurrier.
If you are the wall.
What happens if we both die? This question arose in Enkrid's mind, and on the 89th day the question was resolved.
Gah.
He took his opponent's sword and put a hole in his belly, a sword that pierced through the skin, cut the intestines, and broke a few ribs for good measure. As soon as Enkrid plunged his sword in, he twisted his wrist and pulled it out. Blood gushed from the twisted and extracted wound. The shepherd's complexion turned pale. Blood dripped to the ground, and if the sun had been shining, you would have seen the pink of his intestines. Clutching his belly with his hand, he mumbled,
I can't die here, I have so much to do.
The shepherd's eyes glazed over. Death shadowed his face. His eyes looked at Enkrid, then somewhere far off into the void. Finally, his gaze returned to Enkrid, and the shepherd spoke.
This wasn't necessary.
Really?
Enkrid's neck was also cut by the opponent's sword. He spoke while covering the wound with his hand, his voice rough. The wound wasn't deep. Blood flowed freely, but it wasn't a mortal wound. The problem was that the shepherd's sword was not ordinary. In the meantime, something had changed.
I can endure it.
More than 80 repetitions of today. That meant 80 experiences of the same thing. Unconsciously, Enkrid resisted the something imbued in his opponent's sword. However, the conclusion didn't change. Death loomed. With screams, something roamed his body as if it were its own home, ravaging his heart and brain.
But I will keep moving forward.
Belle's voice was heard from behind. It was Belle's cry as he approached, heard because death had been delayed. He opened his eyes to greet a new day. Enkrid lay there thinking for a moment before half rising from his bed. He returned to his routine, finishing the isolation technique from early dawn and returning to the barracks. He asked in front of all the company members.
Who can use will?
He clearly felt that now, more than ever, he needed to understand it, at least partially. He decided that when the time came, he would overcome it. He believed that time had come. He couldn't overcome it all at once. He didn't believe he would become a knight in a single leap. But if it was a fragment, he felt it was now time to reach out for it. That was Enkrid's belief. The time to walk and reach out was now.